Here we are again. Good to see you. Good to be with you. This is a continuing series on leadership and teamwork with Jesus. In this one, we explore the place of militant action in a mission of peace. In the final act in the drama of his ongoing conflict with the religious leaders, when Jesus came to Jerusalem for the last time, he and his followers were under attack. Jesus responded with a spiritual superiority that overcame every intellectual and physical challenge that his enemies could muster. He brought peace to the soul, and peace that would lead to a wonderful planetary destiny. But that peace and the movement that was carrying the message needed to be protected for future generations. When a movement of love and peace is attacked by people who are trying to destroy it, love does not smile quietly at sin. Jesus' movement needed to be protected by militant and forceful action. He began this fateful week by entering Jerusalem riding on a donkey. This was a symbolic action, recalling the words of Zechariah the prophet. Your king comes to you, triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey. And he shall command peace to the nations. The master thereby communicated that his mission during this week was one of peace. Isaiah had spoken of the one who was to come as the Prince of Peace. Part of Jesus' mission was to open wide the way for people to worship God in spirit and in truth. The master cleared away ritualistic obstacles. His one revolutionary act occurred in the temple, where the poor majority were oppressed by a minority. I quote from the second chapter of John, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting down at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. Vendors were charging unfair rates to exchange money into the coin in which the temple tax had to be paid. Jesus overturned their tables, and there were animal pens that contained ritually perfect animals that were sold at high prices for the noisy and bloody sacrifices associated with the temple rituals of that day. Jesus drove those animals out too. This act utterly disrupted the unholy business in the temple. But Jesus used force in a manner that did not descend into violence. It was ethically elegant. He injured no one, stole no money, and destroyed no property. This was a non-violent use of force. In doing this, the master was not motivated by an immature, hasty, combative urge, a fight or flight reaction. His timing and manner showed wisdom. He had spent a long time planting his positive message, and he had known for long that The time for this encounter had come. He never lost control by giving vent to rage. He acted not in anger, but expressing the beautiful wholeness of righteousness. Jesus' second militant episode was in his last teaching in the temple. The master moved back and forth between militant denunciation and merciful outreach to all his hearers as part of the universal family. The scribes and Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, quoting now, do whatever they teach you and follow it, but do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. In these words, Jesus communicated respect for his office. Note the peaceful notes here. But not respect for the then current office holders in the Sanhedrin. He supported the religious leaders in secondary matters such as tithing various goods, though not in neglecting primary things, for example, by murdering prophets. In this extreme situation, Jesus offered forgiveness and proclaimed the core of his gospel, the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, in the most explicit and direct way. You are all brothers. He's talking to enemies and friends in the same group. All siblings. You have one Father who is in heaven. He said, you are all brothers, and you have one Father who is in heaven. Jesus gave a sobering lesson on what it can mean for religious leaders to be held accountable when accountability is collective and the responsibility spans generations. We know that sometimes we go through the consequences of other people's actions, but sometimes it seems as though we don't have to go through much of the consequences of our own actions. Said Jesus, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your ancestors. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how can you escape being sentenced to Gehenna? Therefore I send you prophets, sages, and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town, so that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Barachiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly, I tell you, all this will come upon this generation. Let me repeat, this is a sobering lesson on what it can mean for religious leaders to be held accountable when accountability is collective and the responsibility spans generations. Jesus knew what was going to come upon Jerusalem. Yes, it would be later when the Romans would surround them and just devastate everything and destroy the temple. Jesus' next to last message in this last temple teaching expressed his repeated desire to save his people. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. But Jesus ended with these blunt words, see, your house is left to you desolate. After that, he left the temple together with his followers. The years of repeated attempts to win over the religious leaders with love and mercy were over. He made no further critique of his enemies and never came back to the temple even after the resurrection. Jesus' conduct of open warfare was done. Jesus' use of confrontation on his message of peace is an example today for all of his followers. The peace of Jesus does not turn a person into a blissful extreme mystic who, when things get rough, fears conflict, becomes passive on the field of action, unable to return good for evil. Instead, following Jesus develops courage and realism along with love and mercy. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, prepares a table of nourishment for us in the presence of our enemies. We continue to worship in spirit and in truth and open the door for others to do the same. And we sustain and proclaim the saving truth that we all have one Father and are all siblings. We trust the Master to continue to lead us in these ways through the Spirit of truth. In addition, there are particular lessons for religious leaders. Take your responsibilities seriously. Realize that you may bear a portion of responsibility for the consequences that arrive sooner or later from perpetuating what is untrue, ugly, and evil. As a leader, the Prince of Peace defended his movement from what would try to destroy it. He gave his opponents each a chance to wake up, and he protected his spiritual peace movement for future generations who would be more receptive. And so for now, whatever is going on in your life and in our world, always know that you are divinely created, infinitely loved, yes, evolutionary free will, son or daughter of the living God, whose spirit dwells within you. Good day.